Welcome to the December meeting of Purple and Gold. Looks like I need to thank the Table of Knowledge over there for showing up. You guys did a great job today. I'd like to introduce the head table. At the far end is our Superintendent, Clint Christopher. Clint, would you like to say a couple words?
Yeah, just great to be here. About a year and a half here in Muscatine. And, excited about some of the things we have going on. Excited to hear about wrestling today from Scott. As a former wrestling coach, it's always good to talk wrestling. Thanks for having me.
How about Roger Bates? He has something he has to say.
Yeah. Our speaker today is Scott Mock, and with the wrestling team. And anybody that missed it the other night, we had a couple exciting matches, and they're in action again tonight. So I'm sure Scott will be talking all about that. But if you get a chance, come out and watch the wrestling team. They're on the rise.
Scott, you don't get a chance to talk yet.
Chuck's always got some stories first.
This is the Charles Barkley story. I saw him on TV the other night, and he said he never worried in college. He said as long as he was leading the Southeast Conference in scoring, his grades were always good. Never sweated the books. This one is about Bob, though. His buddy Earl Weaver, the old manager of the Orioles, he said his strategy was always, if anybody gets kicked out, it should be the manager because it doesn't make any difference to the game. Mike Leach, he's the football coach at Mississippi State right now. He was being interviewed, and one of the sports writers asked him what kind of an athlete he was in college, and he said, well, I was the best dodgeball player in our school system. He said, I actually bordered on greatness. That was my best sport, and I think we can all relate to that. But he was talking about, one of the sports writers asked about, what is the most favorable touchdown you've ever had as a coach? And he said, well, it was when I was at Texas Tech, and Cliff Kingsbury, who's the football coach at the St. Louis, or the Arizona Cardinals now, was his quarterback. And they're behind, just a touchdown, and they're going in, and he signals, he always signals his plays just with numbers, and he goes, number 6. And Kingsbury goes, no. And he goes, number 6. Kingsbury goes, no. Now this time they've run out of time. They got a penalty. So he gets Kingsbury over there and he says, you do this. So Kingsbury goes out on the field. He signals number 6 and he goes, no. So they have another little talk and finally he runs number 6. And number 6, Kingsbury throws for a touchdown. And they're in the lead. And Kingsbury comes over to the sideline and he said, I hope you're happy now, you stubborn SOB. That's how you score a touchdown when you're Mike Leach. Bob, you can agree with this too. They asked him about officials. And he said, it's kind of like the ham and egg story with officials. He said, you have your chickens and, they contribute a little bit. And then you have the pig who's really committed. And he said, us coaches are always the pigs. I think that's about enough, right? So, it's your turn now, Scott. You entertain these guys. It's hard to do.
Oh, I'll try and do that.
Now, I know Scott's been in the wrestling program since 2009, and very valuable assistant, and I know he's off to a really good start with the wrestling program. He was also the freshman, sophomore head coach in football, so really involved in the program. High school counselor, so he's got it all. So thanks for being here, okay?
Thanks. Well, let's talk a little bit about wrestling, and if you have questions or comments, and feel free to interrupt. It doesn't bother me one bit. I'll give you a little bit of background for me. I grew up in the great state of Oregon, so I am a duck through and through. I bleed green and gold. I do root for the Hawkeyes because they have a really good wrestling program, and Oregon doesn't have a wrestling program. And the reason Oregon doesn't have a wrestling program at the University of Oregon is because they got rid of it in 2004 or 5 because they were tired of watching Oregon State win College World Series in baseball, so they ditched wrestling, added baseball. So that's honestly why they don't have a wrestling program. Growing up in high school, I was not the greatest wrestler on my team. I had a lot of great wrestlers on our team, but I always tell people when I was a sophomore in high school, I was the 8th man out of 8 guys in my weight class at my high school. I was small, I wasn't very good, but I loved the sport because at 4'11", my sophomore year, wrestling was the one sport that it didn't matter my size so much. I got to kind of compete with those guys that were right there with me. And so as I did continue on in wrestling, I did end up starting to get a little bit bigger, but nowhere near the size I am now. I wrestled 136 pounds my senior year of high school, and wrestled for a school in Southern Oregon called Crater High School. Back in the late 70s, they started revamping their wrestling program. When I got to it in the 80s, we'd started really having a lot of success. So I started learning from my head coach, whose name was Dan Spiesel, and from Coach Spiesel, just saw a lot of great things going on. In 1987, he actually resigned his spot to become the assistant coach of the wrestling team, to hand it over to a fellow by the name of Greg Haga, who is still there since 1987. I want to say it's been 10 state championships later, multiple top 5 finishes. I mean, it was a juggernaut. When I was there, freshman year, we finished 9th, sophomore year, 2nd, junior year, 9th, and we won't talk about my senior year because it wasn't very memorable. But just to say that I came from a really good program, and from there created the base for really loving the sport, because it's a sport that taught me a lot, not just about wrestling, but about life, about hard work and dedication and discipline. I tell my guys all the time, I say, well, one of the jokes we make is, if it was easy, we'd be playing basketball. And it's a wrestling joke we had in the room for quite a while. And I say that with Coach Trelli being a very close friend of mine. I would say that to him, and I think he would laugh. But one of the things I talk about is that in wrestling, when we're done with practice on any given evening, we finish practice about 6 at night, but we don't get to go home and just do whatever we want. When basketball is done practicing, they can eat whatever they want when they go home. And when wrestlers go home, some of them can eat whatever they want, but most of them are trying to be very conscious about their weight because they want to keep within the windows of what they want to do. So that creates a discipline that has to be present in their life that really transfers into life skills as they get older. Discipline to make sure that they're studying, get their homework done, things like that to transfer into the classroom. It's accountability, which helps them grow in their life. So I love the sport. I'm passionate about the sport. I've been involved with it for a long time. I coached for a little bit in Oregon. And then when I came out to Iowa, I wanted to get involved as I was watching. And then I found out in Iowa you have to have a coaching authorization. So it took me a while to get one of those. And when I finally did, I asked if I could help out with the coach. 2009, Chuck, that was good. That was a long time ago when I started. And started with Robert Struthers.
You had more hair then.
I did have more hair then. And started with Robert Struthers, so I've coached with Robert Struthers, Wade McLeod, and Joe Kane, all of them. So I have watched the program ebb and flow as it does. It's difficult when you've got some really, really good teams in the MAC conference. North Scott, Bettendorf, Assumption continually put out really, really good teams. I remember years ago talking to Don Grenzing about it, kind of complaining about how these other schools, get all the good wrestlers. I mean, Bettendorf, I think it was in 2010, had Freddie Stroker miraculously moved there, who is a 10-time AAU world champion, and he moves to Bettendorf. And I was telling that to Don, and Don says, well, sounds like you guys got to recruit better. And I said, well, that would be nice, but sometimes it's difficult to do. So I've watched the ebbs and flow. Been years where we haven't had state qualifiers, and when Joe Kane came, when he started coaching here, started really developing some philosophies in our program that we want to carry on and continue. One is a lot of hard work, a lot of discipline in conditioning. because I felt that we were losing a lot of matches just because when we got to the end of the match, we were out of gas. We couldn't do anything. And so we started training in a way that we actually condition and do most of our running at the very beginning of practice to help our bodies condition so that when we are tired, we know how to wrestle. And so we do things like that. And that has carried on and been good for us. And then we've seen some results, having qualifiers, I think, the last 4 years in a row. And then having a guy like Tim Nimley, who had a legitimate shot at winning the state championship last year, was a lot of fun to watch because just raw, pure athleticism when he first came into the room. And then last year, his senior year, was just an outstanding wrestler. And, I got to be Matt's side. I got to be Matt's side when he was a sophomore. And one of my favorite stories about Tim was as a sophomore, he came in and was wrestling a kid from Bettendorf who at the MAC tournament, Will Jefferson beat him and tech-falled him, which means he beat him by over 15 points, so they stopped the match. About 5 days later, Tim got to wrestle him again and lost, I want to say, by 8 points at a duel. And we kind of talked through Tim. We watched all the film we could because we try to record every match we have. We rewatch film and watch film. We found out one of the tendencies this other guy would do. So we kind of coached Tim up. And Tim is a sophomore. This guy was a returning state place winner. And at the district match, Tim beats him. And it was at Bettendorf, so that made it even nicer for us as we were all just like cheering. But it's a program that I think is on the rise. When I interviewed for the job, Tom asked about, where do you think we should be? I always think we should be on the upper half. But again, when you're dealing with a Bettendorf and a North Scott and an Assumption, those guys have really, really good programs. And as much as I would like to say they have a down year, I think Bettendorf's reloaded again. And I mean, I want to say out of the 14 wrestlers you have in a starting lineup, I want to say 8 of them are ranked in the state. So it's just really hard to overcome that. We have one young man who's ranked. But we were talking up here, my philosophy is we'll wrestle anybody, anytime, anywhere. The only way we're going to get better is if we do things like that and just commit to wrestling them. And when my wrestlers come up to me and say, well, who do I wrestle next match? And I look at them and I say, doesn't matter. Because they're still going to step out on the mat, and you're still going to have to face them, and you're going to still have to compete with them. So let's not worry about it and work with them about not losing the eye battle. Because they'll look at him and go, does he have big arms? Or does he have a winning record? And it's like, I don't know. I don't study every other wrestler in the world. I study with our guys on what they're good at. And let's not worry about the other one. Let's just get better for what we do. And when we get on the mat, then we can compete. So a little bit about this year's team. We have 10 seniors on the team. Then we have 1 junior. And then the rest is a mix between, there's 30 of them, so 10, 11. So the other 19 are 8 sophomores and 8 freshmen. So we're very young on top of this, learning a lot. One of the things I do as a freshman football coach is I spend a lot of time recruiting. I tell these guys that want to be great football players, I say, if you want to be a great football player, you need to come out and wrestle, especially our linemen, because in football, for a lineman, they need to have that leverage and balance that helps them be a good lineman, good footwork. And I said, wrestling will teach you all of that. And then if you're a running back, wrestling will just teach you to be tough. If you're a quarterback, wrestling will teach you to be tough. I just want them all to come out for wrestling. So I spend a lot of time recruiting there, and then once we get them in the room, trying to develop them to be really good wrestlers and quality young people for us. One of the things that's happened over the last few years that's changed the kind of the scope and framework of wrestling is having girls wrestling. I'm sure that everybody has an opinion about it. I remember when I was in high school, that was about the last thing anybody wanted to even think about or talk about was wrestling a girl on the mat. But it's way more common today than it was, 30, 40 years ago when I wrestled in high school. Now we have girls teams. There's actually a school in our area this year that has 20 girls out for wrestling and 6 out for basketball. So that just kind of tells you how the scope and the landscape is changing for girls wrestling. One of the ways we've embraced that a little bit for us, though, we don't mind the girls wrestling. We would rather them wrestle girls because it seems like it's a more competitive balance that way. But if they wrestle boys, I mean, I will put Skyler and Bailey against any boys. They will try hard when they get out there and do it. But if they wrestle girls, then girls can do things with their bodies that, I mean, I'll see them be in front of their hands like this, and at their hips, they've done like a 180, and their body's pointing in a different direction. It's like, boys can't do that. So it's really the same sport, but it's different in the way they approach it because of what they can do. We have our 10 seniors. Most of them are in the varsity lineup. The ones that aren't are just caught in a log jam that they can't make it through. But right now we have 2 of our young men that are sitting at 82 and 80 wins. So probably at the 1st of January, they're going to break the 100 win threshold, which is a pretty big deal to wrestle for that long and be that consistent in getting wins. We've got a solid lineup. There's 14 weight classes, and we're filling 13 of them right now. It's hard for us, for whatever reason, in Muscatine. I'll have 6 or 7 heavyweights, but I can't get anybody that weighs under 106 pounds. Right now, our 106 pounder, if he hits 100 pounds in a weigh-in, we're pretty excited because he's a small guy, but you go out there at 97 pounds wrestling somebody who weighs 106, and you're giving up 10% of your body weight. That's a lot to push around. So we struggle with the lighter weights, but this year we've been fortunate that we have a lot of our weights covered. The other thing that's really good for us this year is that we have 5 home meets. Last Monday night we wrestled West Liberty and Highland. Then tonight we wrestle Assumption and Davenport Central. Then the start of the school year, or the start of the new year, we have our JV home meet that will be here, which will be, I want to say it's 7 other schools that are coming to us from that, which will be all our JV wrestlers, which for JV wrestlers, it's all about getting them matches. We don't want them to have buys. We want them to get on the mat. We want them to wrestle somebody they've wrestled that's outside of our room. So JV tournaments are a lot of fun because you're going to see every gamut of wrestling you've ever thought of. Those who are pretty good, they just can't break their varsity lineup, and those who are still learning the sport and how it works. So it's a lot of fun to watch JV tournaments, and we get to host one here. And then in February on the 20th, we host Bettendorf and Davenport North here. And then we also get to host the MAC tournament this year here at Muscatine. So we have a lot of good tournaments and wrestling coming into our high school, which is what we like. And it always helps when you have a full lineup of a team, because then you get to watch a lot of people wrestle. And, we got, like I said, a lot of good guys wrestling. I don't know what more you would want. Have I covered everything?
Any questions?
Talk about some individuals.
Okay, I can talk about individuals. I don't like doing it because then I have to listen to them. And I mean that in the nicest way, because then are you talking to I've got the poster in front of me, and you guys are all welcome to a poster. Just to kind of talk a little bit about each one of them. I'll highlight on the seniors just because I've had them for a long time. But I'll start out with Jeff Fridley and Mason Crabtree. Mason is 145 pounds. He's the one sitting at 82 wins right now, so he's probably going to hit the 100-win mark here in January. Mason was a state qualifier in his sophomore year, and then last year just was in a very, very tough weight class and couldn't get out of district. Jeff Fridley is sitting at 80 wins. Probably pound for pound the strongest young man on our team. He's just very good at wrestling. He's wrestled his whole life. It's a love-hate, I think, relationship with wrestling for him. He's done it so much. There's times he loves it, and there's times he hates losing and walking out. When he walks off the mat after he loses, that's when he hates the sport. But he's always back the next day working hard, and I enjoy watching him because his attitude and his attention to preparation has been remarkable this year. Same with Mason. They're both finding other people in the room in which they can wrestle with rather than just wrestling with the same partner every day, which helps you drill, but it doesn't help you get better. you got to find other people, guys that weigh more than you, so you have to push a lot of weight around. You want to find guys that are a little lighter than you so you can understand how the quickness works. So we try and move them around. So Jet and Mason are a lot of fun to watch. Then we have Nate Beatty. Nate's a great story for us because last year Nate wrestled at 220 pounds. Over the course of the year, he has worked hard, both in the weight room and just working out. He's now wrestling at 182 pounds for us. He has lost 20 plus pounds between his junior and senior year, and he looks fantastic. He's just a really, really good kid. He's wrestled a lot of matches. Probably one of those ones where it didn't come naturally to him at first. I mean, he comes from a football family. His two older brothers were pretty good at football and very built much different than Nate. They were quick and lean. Nate is a big boy, but he is really lean down and looks really good right now. And he's starting to see some success on the mat for us as well. Kaden Fisher is our 195 pounder. Kaden has really developed as a wrestler. He is one of the ones that goes on the mat, and if you're not careful, you're going to end up on your back instantly because he knows how to throw about anyone. Some of his issues tend to be sometimes he tries to throw people he shouldn't be trying to toss, and because of that, he's really started to develop a nice shot, so now he can get takedowns that way. Conor Beck, another senior at 152 pounds, has wrestled with us for a lot of years. Last year, Conor was probably, I think I want to say his record was like 13-22. The issue became he tore his labrum in between his sophomore and junior year. So by the time he got healthy to wrestle last year, we were mid-season, and I think he was always a little nervous about hurting it. This year, there's no brace, doctors full go, and Conor's really developing into a nice wrestler for us, somebody that we can count on to get wins. Ben Gross and Michael Kwitzel are two seniors that are in JV right now. And part of that, Michael Kwitzel could probably crack a lineup in other schools. He's just in a log jam because he weighs 195 pounds and he can't beat Nate Beatty at 182. So if he went down, that's not going to happen. He can't beat Kaden Fisher at 195, and he can't go up to 220 and wrestle Evan Frankie because he can't be. So he's just stuck. So what I try and do with somebody like a Michael Kwitzel and a Ben Gross is, like, we have a tournament coming up in Fort Madison this weekend, and I've asked Fort Madison if I can bring some of these JV guys that are good wrestlers. They just can't get into our varsity lineup. And there's enough tournaments that when the tournament happens, there's enough weight classes that aren't full. So if you have a 16-man bracket for your tournament, there might be 10 spots that are filled by the teams that are there, even though there's 16 teams. So if you ask, sometimes they'll let you bring your JV guys and they can go in and wrestle in those brackets as a non-point getting wrestler. So this weekend we actually have the opportunity to take Michael Kwitzel and Ty Kozad with us to Fort Madison to see if we can get them some varsity matches and get them some experience. And then there's my two girls are seniors, Bailey Hawkins and Skyler Pactinger. Skyler, this is her very first year wrestling. Her very first tournament, she went out and won all three matches and won the tournament right out of the gate and felt pretty confident. She walked off the mat after she won her last match, went, oh, like that to me. And I'm like, that's good, that's good. But just remember, sometimes that's going to happen to you. And it doesn't feel good when you see the person who beat you do that. So we want to maintain sportsmanship. And she goes, but it feels so good. And I said, I get it. So she's seen some success. She's seen some struggles when she has to wrestle boys. She started to understand, there's a big difference in the strength and how they come about. They come at you in wrestling. And then Bailey Hawkins wrestled with us last year. I believe was just one win away from placing at the state tournament for girls. But she also tore her labrum, and so she just got cleared this week to start wrestling again. So she's getting on the mat, and we say getting your sea legs to you, because it's one thing to practice and run and ride a stationary bike and feel like you're in shape. It's completely different when you walk onto the mat and then you got to wrestle for 6 minutes and somebody's trying to grind your head into the mat or make your leg do something you don't want it to do. It takes an enormous amount of energy that the stationary bike doesn't do anything. It just helps me ride and get my lungs to us. So we say get our sea legs to us. That means getting mat time out there so that we understand what it is like when we are on the mat. Couple of other guys just to highlight our lightweights right there at 132 and 126 pounds. We have Gavin Mcleod, which is Wade McLeod's son. If you know Wade, probably the best heavyweight, probably the best wrestler that's come through Muscatine High School. Gavin is a little guy, though. Gavin weighs 126 pounds. But Gavin's really scrappy. He gets out there, and he's wrestled so many matches, he knows what to do when he hits the mat. Plus, he's got a lot of family support. Plus, I think he has 6 brothers, so there's a lot of wrestling that goes on at home as well. And Gavin's been able to get us some really good and key wins. And then there's Lincoln Brookhart, who's at 132 pounds. He's the one that last Monday night was in a match, and I believe he was down 4-0, and then fought his way back and ended up winning the match in overtime. He's also developing. Last year, he was mainly a JV wrestler, bounced in the varsity lineup a couple of times, but nothing significant. And then this year earned his spot and has wrestled really, really well. And then the last wrestler I'll talk about is Evan Frankie. He's a sophomore, wrestling at 220 pounds. We've talked with him a lot about maybe if he was talking about going to 195 pounds. And one thing I'll say about that, because one of the bad raps on wrestling is that we make you cut weight.
I was going to ask you to talk about
that. Yeah. Rarely, there's a couple of things about that. Let me get to Evan, I'll go to that. So anyway, Evan, his record's 11-2 right now at 220 pounds. I said, Evan, let's have the conversation. I don't think you need to go and drop weight. He's right at 200 pounds. It's 5 pounds we're talking about, but I think he's having so much success right now. His first loss of the season was at West Delaware, and was to the number 2 ranked kid in the state from West Delaware. And then he lost this last weekend, and I can't remember who it was to, but it was at the Mount Vernon tournament, which at Mount Vernon you have Lisbon, Assumption. I mean, you got the big boys. There's the smaller schools, but in wrestling, it doesn't matter the size of your school. Wrestling's wrestling. And good guys can come from whatever size high school you have. New London I remember last year, New London has a lineup of about 5 wrestlers, but one of them is a 3-time defending state champion who is remarkable and very good at what he does. And I also go back to my old high school days. Benson High School in Portland, Oregon, when I was a junior, took 5th place in their district tournament, which isn't very good, and they won the state title because they had 4 guys that won state championships, and they pinned their way all the way to the titles. So it doesn't matter sometimes what school size it is if you got good wrestlers, you have good wrestlers. Evan Frankie is one of those for us. He's just really come along really well. One of the unknown parts of Evan was that last year he wrestled in the freestyle tournament. He went to Fargo, North Dakota, which is the largest amateur freestyle tournament in the country, and he made it all the way to the quarterfinals before he started getting with the big boys who really know what they're doing. But I'm pretty proud of Evan. He has worked really, really hard, and he's doing a really good job. And he's of all the ones, and all of them are. I could talk about each one of them because I think they're all great kids. They work hard. I think we have a good rapport in the room. They know when it's time to work. They know when it's time for us to have fun. I try and incorporate a little bit of fun into it. We play dodgeball occasionally. Even in our workouts, we'll do leg wrestling, arm wrestling, headstand contests, those types of things to build their core, but also have a little bit of, they want to compete. That's why they're there. So we put things in there to let them compete. And like I said, every one of them I enjoy hanging out with for the most part. At the end of a Saturday at a long tournament, I'm a little less happy to spend so much time with them when I'm getting all the questions about what we're going to eat and all that. I'm like, no. So the weight question. For us, and I don't know about other programs, but for us, I kind of learned from my head coach, I never ask anybody to cut weight, ever. Ever. There's a couple reasons for that. One is it's hard enough wrestling. You add cutting weight into it, then that just takes it to a different level. But occasionally there are kids that will look at me and say, they say they weigh 145 pounds and they're wrestling, and they're realizing, man, I weigh 141 pounds, and the guy's wrestling at 138 pounds. I can beat every one of those guys. maybe I should drop. I go, well, that's your decision, and maybe we'll have a conversation with mom and dad about that as well. But it is their decision. And my only thing is, though, is if you tell me you're going to hit 138 pounds at this meet, I expect you to hit 138 pounds at this meet. If you don't, then is when we have some problems, and just like I have to set lineups before we go, so it throws everything off. And we talk about being a good teammate, and we want to do it the right way. A couple of years ago we brought in nutritionists to talk about how to cut weight the healthy way, and we've recorded all that. We have all of that information available so that when our wrestlers are trying to cut weight, it's like we're not cutting weight by starving ourselves. We're cutting weight by eating healthy and reducing the calorie intake that we have rather than just cutting out everything. And I tell them the best way to lose weight is cut out the pop, the chips, and any of the candy that you think you have to have, and the energy drinks. Because energy drinks are loaded with sugar and caffeine. They aren't helping you. Pop is terrible. All those things in the midst of the season. Once season's over, if you want to take, that's fine. But in the season, you want to feel good on the mat, you have to eat right and take care of your nutrition. And those who do it usually come up to me and say that. It is remarkable that they feel better when they eat right. There's one other element to cutting weight. The governing body for wrestling does not allow us. When I wrestled, I weighed 155 pounds, and I had to make 136 pounds in 10 days, and I did it. I wore a sauna suit. I starved myself. I ran until I couldn't run anymore, and I laid underneath the mat to make a cocoon, to sweat even more. I spit constantly. It was a very unhealthy way of losing weight. Now you can't do that. At the very beginning of practice, at the beginning of the season, all of our guys weigh in on a scale that measures their body fat as well. And so from that weight and the calculation of their body weight, we have a descent plan that they are allowed to follow. And there are certain weights, you can only drop so much weight. Like right now, my 120 pounder weighs 116 pounds, and he is not allowed to go to 113 pounds because he doesn't have the body fat to do that. So he's stuck at 120 pounds, and there's nothing I can do about that. I have another wrestler who started out at 160 pounds. He wants to go all the way to 138, and I'm going, why? You're a freshman. We don't need to do this. But he's pretty determined, and his parents are on board, and I'm like, okay, we're doing this the right way. But like this week, he came in a little bit lower than, and they tell you every week what their minimum weight can be. And he came in a little lower than it, and I said, that's unacceptable. We want to do this healthy. So we have to gain back that weight and do it the right way. And he wasn't a lot under. He was like 0.5 of a pound. But every time you're under the weight you can be for that week, it's a big red mark in track wrestling, which is what we use. So I watch that constantly because it does us no good to have unhealthy wrestlers who just don't feel good because they're not doing it the right way or getting people injured. The head coaching job, one of the things it does is the administration it's a juggernaut. There's just a lot of juggling of, you got to go put wrestlers in for a tournament you're wrestling in. Well, they want to know who they've wrestled, what their record is, what their record was last year, who they wrestled last year, what they do in freestyle. So you're constantly trying to dig up all this stuff, and it takes a lot of time, a lot more time than I thought it did. But it's also fun because you can see where they've come from and the successes that they've had and how they're developing moving forward. We've only got one wrestler right now that doesn't have a win. Only one at Christmas, which is remarkable because I can tell you years we've gone till all the way through to the end of the season before we'd get somebody with a win. But everybody's got at least one win except for one of our wrestlers, so I'm pretty proud of them for that.
My wrestling coach at Denison was Brent Hagan, and he was the national champion. And he told me that when he weighed in on Thursday at the national tournament, he made 125, and on Sunday he weighed 152 pounds. But he only did that once or twice a year. So, but that's how they used to cut weight in those days.
Yeah, that was a lot.
And he was.
I wrestled for 2 years. As a freshman, I weighed 88 pounds, and I played a French horn in the band.
Yep.
I caught a lot of crap about that.
Yeah, so our 106 pounder who weighs 98 pounds plays trombone in band. You know, so.
I couldn't play football unless they needed football.
Any other questions?
Clarify the rule as far as somebody getting pinned. Is there a certain time limit? That
Okay.
I thought it used to be in the old days, it was like 3 seconds, you hold them down. But I mean, it's like, sometimes it's like, did the shoulder touch and they're beeping him out?
Yeah, once the shoulders touch, they're pinned, and the ref sees that.
Okay. So
Problem gets is that they kind of get out of position, so they may not see one blade hit, but coaches always see it. We're yelling at them. Yeah.
How could a referee?
There's no way around. Well, sometimes they'll be in the right, and then they tweak them a little bit, and so they move, and so yeah, it is both.
Simultaneous.
Yeah, they both have to be down at the same time. Once they are, then that's a fall.
One other one is, I've seen a couple, I haven't been to a lot of wrestling matches lately, but they don't always start at the bottom weight anymore.
No.
They go up. How do they determine? Does that change all the time, or
We draw for it.
you draw for it?
Yeah, so what we'll do, like we did Monday night, we'll write all the weights on a little piece of paper and fold them up and put them in a hat. Whatever one comes out, that's where we start.
And then you just start to go up.
Yeah, so like last Monday night, we started at 126, and we went from 26 to 32, 38, 45, and then the next match, then it doesn't start at 26, it starts at 32. So you just keep climbing that way.
They got to be mentally prepared.
Part of the reason they did that in high school was because some of the schools that had really good lightweight wrestlers, I mean, they'd be all done, and it's like, and then you get heavyweight, and it's like, this is just another way of making sure that everybody feels valued and gets valued in that. So, yeah.
I thought it was to get the parents there early.
It is to get the parents there, because everybody's guessing.
Yeah.
We don't tell you beforehand.
What's the count? Oh, I'm sorry. What's the count for 2-point near fall, 3-point near fall?
So 2-point near, so for a near fall, which is like almost a pin. So if the shoulders are at a 90-degree angle, there's no points awarded. But if I can get the shoulders under that, into that 40, under the 90 degree, into the 45, anywhere past that 90, you'll see a ref start doing this, which means he's counting that off. If he gets to 2, and then the guy gets up and back out, then that's a 2-point near fall. But if you can hold him there for over 5 seconds, then that's a 3-point near fall. So then that just becomes a game in and of itself, as if you can create tilts and things like that where you can get points. I mean, there's moves that we do specifically to put them and expose their shoulders to the mat, because even though we know we're not going to pin them with the move, we're going to get the points out of it. So there are things like that we teach. So, yeah.
You already kind of alluded on it, but the challenges with the girls now going into wrestling, and I mean, you know, it's got to be very challenging you as a coach to get the mindset going there, because you know, hey, all of us pick up the paper, we see that somebody's getting charged for groping or so on and so forth, and so you know, hopefully you know we're teaching our kids not to do that kind of thing, but now we go into wrestling.
Yeah.
So much of wrestling is groping, you know.
Yeah.
So how do you get the mindset in order to do that?
It's funny because they actually take care of that themselves, because a lot of them are, I mean, they're friends anyway.
Yeah.
And I think the girls coming into the room know what is going to happen. I mean, it's wrestling. You know, you're tying up, you're doing things. Matter of fact, I've never seen it where it's ventured into anything inappropriate. I think a few years ago, the boys were a lot more conscious about it. I don't think today they think about it. I think they kind of have put it out of their mind, like, this is just another wrestler. It happens to be a girl, but I'm not going to treat it any different.
And I'll just throw in there, I think girls wrestling is one of the fastest growing sports in the country. And
World,
I think,
I think.
Yeah, I mean, University of Iowa started a team. You know, and I think that's good. I think it's good for girls. I think it's good for the sport. You know, so you're seeing a lot more of that, and competitive, more of that contact sport for girls is growing too, because they're looking for that avenue as well. They're interested in that. So, girls rugby, girls wrestling, all those sports are just climbing throughout the country.
Do you see it kind of separating out where the girls will,
There's a girls' state tournament now.
yeah.
It's not fully sponsored by the
No,
state.
it's not sanctioned yet.
But it's gonna be real
But it should
quickly.
be. It
Yeah,
should
I've
be.
heard that.
Yeah.
And that's exciting.
City High has like 30 girls, girls out for wrestling this year.
Bettendorf has 20,
Yeah, so,
North
I mean,
Scott
that's-
has a
Will
bunch.
Will we go to the girls' team eventually? Is that planned?
If they sanction it.
So one of the things that's like under consideration, a lot of people are wondering about right now is girls wrestling is not a sanctioned sport by the Iowa Girls High School Athletic Union. So one of the big discussion points is it going to be sanctioned? There's a requirement of at least 50 schools have to ask for it and say we'll support it as a sanctioned sport, which that 50 number has been reached now. These 50 schools have sent in to say that we'll support it. Once it would then be considered for sanction, there's a lot of rulemaking and things that need to be put in place that just don't exist right now. So, like right now, the state girls wrestling tournament that exists in Coralville in early February, I think.
Late January.
Late January, when that tournament happens, that's not a sanctioned by the girls' union or the athletic association tournament. So there are rules that are slightly different. I mean, there's not like specific weight classes laid out all the time like the boys have. With that, there's not all of the same guidelines that are followed. If schools decide to sanction, and once it becomes a sanctioned sport, then you're either sanctioning wrestling as a school sport, or you've got to figure out something different
Right.
to do with it. It's similar kind of to how bowling started, actually. There was a trial period, and then schools had to decide, do we have bowling or not?
Same thing with soccer.
Yep, soccer.
Way it got going.
Another thing that's
soccer's
got,
kind of the same way, with that. With the girls' participation, it's great. I mean, it's super great.
They lead the way.
now,
I mean, I did, like 30 years ago, did some soccer coaching.
Oh, you did not.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. But not at the level that you guys were involved with. But at that time, there wasn't any separation between the boys and the girls. And, but some of the girls ended up being some of the better players,
out on the weekends, are there varsity girls tournaments that our girls can go to, or are they relegated to JV tournaments all the time?
Well, it's not necessarily a varsity tournament, but there are girls tournaments. So, like this weekend in Wilton, there's a JV tournament, but they're gonna have they have a girls division that goes along with it. So it's girls wrestling girls, and they cheer for each other and stuff. The opposing team, which throws you off a little bit. It's funny because they get on the mat and you watch them. They want to tear each other apart, and they have the ability to walk off the mat and like they're hugging with their arm around each other, and it's like, well, that's not. But you know what? If it's working, that's great, because I think that anything to advance the sport, and Helen Morales, who is Olympic bronze medalist, she can wrestle. I mean, they have a technique that is unbelievable, and like I said, the sport's a little different, but I enjoy watching girls wrestling as much as men's wrestling because they can do moves men can't. And they're just, and I think the other interesting part about girls wrestling to me is that most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, the women that are doing wrestling are pretty stout athletes, and then when they get off the mat and you see them in their high heels and their dress, I mean, it's such a contrast, but it's like that's who they are. It's like it's something for us to teach all wrestlers. It's like what's on the mat doesn't have to be your personification off the mat. You know what? We try and teach a lot that whatever battle we have in the room stays in the room. When we walk out of the room, we are a person. Excuse me. And I remember when I was in high school, two of my buddies were in a wrestle-off. Returning state champion, our JV wrestler, and the state champion got beat. They started getting into a fight. And in the wrestling room, the coaches in the wrestling room were kind of like, yeah, let them go a little bit, you know, and then kind of break it up. But they carried it on into the locker room. And our coach had really preached to us that, you know, outside of the room, we are best friends. And we have each other's back because only we know what goes on, you know, to cut weight, to diet, to eat right, to work out and push your body. And we can't have us turning on each other when we walk out of here. So that when we got to the locker room and the fight erupted again, our coach pulled us back into the wrestling room, all of us. And I have never run so much in my life. And I learned the lesson. What happens in the room, you know, it's not that it's anything secretive, but we're family, and we gotta, you know, we're gonna take it out on each other. It's like I can call my sister ugly, but if anybody else does, then you know it's gonna make me upset. And I think that, you know, it's just one of those mantras. So for girls, I mean, on the mat, their personality as a wrestler and an athlete is amazing, and then you see them off the mat and go, they wrestle? Because it contrasts. But I say that and I think, well, I have boys that are the same way. It's like, they wrestle? And they're really good at it. So I think wrestling's, my wife's the theater director. So I see people that what their personality is in the hallway, they get on stage and all of a sudden they just become this character. And it's like, wow, that's amazing how they can do that. And it's just, you're not defined by just this. You can have a lot of depth and elements to who you are. And I think that's the nice thing.
Don Miller was the wrestling coach at Fort Dodge for a long time, and he was telling me that one time he had this really good kid. He had to make weigh-ins, and he missed the weight. And he said, Coach, he said, I didn't have anything to eat since last night. He said, all I had was a 6-pack of pop. It's like 5,000 calories.
8 million calories, yes. That's the stuff that drives you crazy.
Well, thanks for being here. Again, we talked a little bit about this last month. You know, if we have speakers, we got to try and get people here, and if we can't get people here, then we probably, you know, shouldn't do this. So we'll go again in January. I think we're going to have Grant here, talk about the baseball facility, and then afterwards go over there and take a tour of it. So talk it up with your buddies. Roger, you got anything to say?
No, once again, like Chuck said, we need to get some people here. You know, it's
Roger will be running the show.
How do you get the word out?
We get it out. I mean, we put it on Twitter, we put it on Facebook. Roger has it in the paper twice. We got our good friend Chris over here.
I mean, the best thing is, you know, you guys talking to people, you know.
It's a tough time, I know, with the time of the day for a lot of people. But
It's a message out to Jeff's grandfather, told him he was about over here, he didn't make it.
a little wind, and everybody wants to stay home probably. You know. Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you. Very interesting, Scott.
Thanks.